Good morning, church. Welcome to your daily devotional on Spread the Good. And I'm going to read from 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7, which is the main verse for today. And it says, "The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart." Now, we've been watching the Chosen series. It's quite biblically accurate, but adds a creative imagination, historical backstory to the biblical characters for our entertainment and for better understanding. It's quite good. And while watching this great series, one group of people caught my attention. They were Israelites' most devout and religious, pious and respected. They followed and upheld the traditions and laws given by Moses. You know who they are, the scribes and Pharisees, of course. After the Jews came back from captivity, most of the people did not know the Moses given law nor the Hebrew language. And it is our Pharisees and scribes who were the religious leaders who taught and instructed their people. The idea was that God would send the Messiah to the rescue of the Jews as Israel was oppressed by the Romans only if Israel observed and obeyed the law. And they helped to interpret the law into daily practical lifestyle. So, for example, Moses' law said, keep the Sabbath holy. 6 days God worked, on the seventh day he rested. Therefore, it is holy, and anyone who works on the Sabbath shall be put to death. Exodus chapter 31, 12 to 17. Okay, so no work should be done. But what constitutes work? The religious leaders handed down an oral tradition of 39 different categories of work under four subcategories. First one of these is the order of bread. Now, this is just some extra gyan, just helping you to get a gist of the background. The order of bread had various categories in it: agricultural activities prohibited, cooking activities prohibited, sorting activities prohibited. So, things like if you set up the cutlery at the time of eating, that was okay. But if you're laying out the table in advance and not eating immediately, that is a serious transgression. Thankfully, peeling fruits was okay. The other work category was the order of garments. This is everything to do with clothing, right from shearing sheep for wool to stitching, weaving, laundry, everything. All these activities prohibited. Another category was order of hides. Now, this is everything to do with hunting, trapping, skinning, tanning, dyeing the leather, those kind of things, all prohibited. Construction was the final group where all sorts of activities relating to creating houses, building things prohibited to an extent that one of its subcategories had even writing, painting, erasing anything was prohibited. Even putting out a fire was prohibited unless it was causing the loss of human life. But it was okay if the house burned down, that you don't put out. That was not prohibited. Number 1629. It says, don't go out on the Sabbath. Yes, that's there in the Bible. It says, honor the Sabbath and do not go out. So the oral tradition interpreted this as you can only walk within a kilometer from your house. Walking beyond this was dishonoring the Sabbath. Some even counted steps. Maybe that's where Fitbit got the idea. And there are many more examples of these ridiculous, burdening down traditions. Now, the Pharisees, they made a huge show of their obedience to these laws to command respect. They didn't associate with anybody who didn't follow or observe these laws. They tagged them as sinners. They had very elaborate hand washing ceremonies for ceremonial cleansing, uh, loud prayers, reciting and mumbling scriptures, and had the phylacteries and things tied around them and on their clothes. Um, when they fasted, the whole town knew about it. They had flamboyant speeches. They made very public donations so that people could appreciate. And they loved being called learned and rabbi. And they got the best seats served for them and reserved at weddings and functions, etc. Show off is basically their swag. Jesus, however, he reserved some of his finest vocabulary for them. You hypocrites, brood of vipers, whitewashed tombs, you fools, blind guides. All of their so-called righteous works amounted to nothing, and they received some strong criticism in Matthew chapter 23. Verse 5 sums it up. Everything they do is done for people to see. What a tragedy. All that effort, strict discipline to follow the law, are in vain and bear no fruit. It is because they did not follow the greatest commandment of all, which is to love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, all your mind and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. They followed the letter of the law to the T, but they could not comprehend the spirit of the law, which is love. Jesus, when he is answering one of their questions, which was intended to trap him, in Luke chapter 10, verses 25 onwards, he answers somebody saying, "Who is my neighbor?" And that's when we have this epic parable of the Good Samaritan, where a priest and a Levite, they observe all the ceremonial law by keeping themselves holy, and they do not defile themselves and avoid a mugged, half-dead person on the road. But a Samaritan who was untouchable to the Jews, he reached out and cared for him and was a real, true neighbor who acted in love. Now, just like the Pharisees, sometimes legalism can creep into our churches as well. And we need to constantly guard our hearts, correct our motives, so we don't imitate the Pharisees. I've listed some points over here that are pitfalls that we can avoid. So, things like compulsory Sunday service attendance, but without motive for real fellowship and building one another. Giving with intention of receiving something back, having quiet time as a habit rather than looking to meet with the Lord and receive the daily manna for the day. Lack of friends outside the church, or even looking down on homosexuals, drunkards, addicts, sharing testimonies that self glorify more than glorify God. Uh, Even Christian ministry, word, worship, playing an instrument, uh, random acts of kindness, even these, we can end up exalting ourselves more and have it as a secret motive rather than the actual loving the person and doing it out of worship and service to God. A easy, simple test to check our motives is how we feel if no one compliments our actions, no one compliments the service, or even better, what is our heart condition if somebody criticizes it? This helps us to understand what is our motive. How do we feel? Now, I'm not saying that all these activities should be stopped. No, definitely not. Obedience is how we need to live. It's not how we were saved. We do not do these things to be saved, but we do it out of love. And if it is not coming out of love, we're not building on the foundation that is Jesus, which is building in vain. The motive is what counts. Only God and I know our motive. One day, we will all, including believers, be judged according to our works. Of course, we are saved by grace, not by works. But the evidence of Jesus' saving grace in our life is the fruit of the Spirit, accompanied by the good works. And each one's works will be tested by fire. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, 13 to 14. In closing, I pray that each one's works is out of love, with a correct motive, and may we be rewarded for the good works that stand the test of fire. Remember, letter of the law is love. Thank you, and God bless.